This morning, we are going to get right into it with Chris Summers, CEO of the Summers team. Chris and I have been good friends for a long time in the industry, and we're both pretty much in 22 years in this crazy world of real estate. And so this morning, Chris, I have this quote for our podcasts. And the most successful people are those who accept and adapt to constant change. This adaptability requires a degree of flexibility and humility most people can't manage.
I mean, what a beautiful quote that is. And yeah, we have been friends and friendly competitors, right? Kind of like the Phillies Dodgers, but hopefully, the better competitor will come out on top. Yeah, but mad respect to you, your podcast. And I think that quote, I mean, that's powerful. And that quote obviously could apply to life. And it really, like with the real estate industry, with us in 22 years, Maria, we've had the financial crisis, we've had foreclosures, short sales, we've had interest rates at basically zero, right? And then
Basically,
we had massive inflation. I talk about the fact that the real estate industry, in essence, has been in a recession, but no one else really talks about that. When transactions in the city of Philadelphia are down 30%, 2023 versus 2022. If that's and it hasn't improved since then, it's kept going down a little bit year in and year out. I mean, that in essence is a recession, and in essence, I guess as your quote applies, change and adaptability, in that market or this market or any market, is critical, for growth or even survive, right? Yes, I heard like a lot of people talk about survive and thrive. Yeah, but you can't thrive sometimes until you survive, right? But there's still a lot of opportunity. But let's face it, it's been tough for our industry last few years.
yeah, not only are sales down, but the sales that we are having, like there's very big chance and of them falling apart in the 11th hour. So, and they are, and they have been, for crazy things, you know. Um,
Well, the good news is, when you had the Marias of the world involved in a transaction or the Chris Summers of the world, chances are that getting to closing and finalizing will be higher. But you're right. Yeah, I see that the termination percentage, has been very high, from a historic standpoint.
s-
Um, and the deals,
so,
go ahead.
so think about this, right? If it was just us in the transaction, Chris, and not some other side that has mm, very little experience or just maybe works another job and real estate is a part-time thing and they don't know how to do the deal and they're not giving their client the best advice or the right advice is a big is a big part of that equation. So if I only did my own transactions, we'd have a better, much better chance of getting to the end for mostly probably all of them. The fact that we're dealing with the other side makes us even that doesn't know what they're doing makes it even worse.
Yes, there's good news, bad news to that. The bad news is kind of like what you just said. The good news, like I'll kind of like allude to the financial crisis. It's like, a lot of like realtors left the industry. A lot of the horrible mortgage companies left the industry, and that's kind of one reason like some things don't get the closing. But the good news is like as we kind of get through this mud and this muck, is um, the better agents will get better, and some of the agents that just aren't doing anything or much at all, they have those one or two transactions a year, probably will float out, or they have the opportunity to step up. Maybe they should join the Maria Quattrone team,
Maybe they
or maybe
should. Or
I
they should
think they
join the
should.
Chris Summers team.
They get this, either or, but I
They
think
have two great choices.
exactly. But I mean, I think that's one trend that's obviously happened over the years. Is like, unless the solo agent's been around for a while, they have a big like referral network or whatnot. I mean, it's super, super difficult. I think you would agree for a new or newer agent, to be solo and not be on a team, due to the massive amount of tasks and things that need to be done. I mean, that's one trend that's been going on for a
I
while. And
100%. I think that it's virtually almost impossible for a new person to make it. If
yeah,
you think the numbers, I mean, 13% make it after 2 years. 87% leave. Now, if you join a team, those numbers are much, much different. Much different.
correct. Like I remember when I was president of GPAR in 2019, at new member orientation, I would tell people that the over under, I use gambling terms sometimes, for someone to stay in the business is exactly what you said, 2 years. And if you fast forward to today, again, due to some of the things that have changed, it's probably down to a year and a half. You know what I mean? So, there's a lot of challenge there. But again, with that, it's kind of like the 80-20 rule with anything, Maria, as you know. Like there's tons of opportunities for those agents, to get to the top 20% and not the bottom 80%. But it does require all those things: hard work, diligence, showing up, follow up, sales skills, learning, developing. And it does seem like, correct me if I'm wrong, that since COVID, some like for people to have all those traits or personalities or strengths isn't as much as it used to be prior to COVID. But that might just be, kind of like an assumption on my part. But I think we will get there, and the opportunity is there in front of all of us.
We certainly will. I said in our meeting on Friday, I said, now is the time to hunker down. Hunker down. Do as much as you humanly can do between now and Christmas. Because not only will it have great effect on 2026, you'll still get business into 2025. And because so many people are in a stuck place at the moment, and if you do more, you'll stand out. You'll be able to have, have more business and really, really have the opportunity to get some of this business where you have about this year so far 250,000-ish. I think it's 244 licensees have left the industry. So there will be more of that at the end of the year because dues come up and people won't be able to continue on if you're only doing a few transactions a year. So I think it's an opportune time right now. One of the things I had to tell myself all the time, Chris, is that we are not what we do. We are not real estate. We're people. People look at us a lot of times like we're real estate. That's our thing, real estate. I'm like, well, I'm not real estate. I'm a human, right? We have feelings. We have emotions. And the thing is, because we're so tied to what we do, because real estate is kind of like a lifestyle business in the sense of like it's around us constantly. Like, did you ever go to a dinner with somebody you haven't seen and they do not ask you about the market? It's the only industry where everybody always wants to talk about it. So you're constantly
This is
around,
true.
which is
There's
good,
always
good and
always
bad.
something to, good and bad. It's always something to talk about. I certainly don't. I love talking about it, but obviously it comes in ways where you need like some Maria time, you need some Chris time. Sometimes that might be at home. And let's face it, like our industry, it's like we have our cell phones everywhere. Clients are texting, emailing, calling at all times during the day, Saturday and Sunday. There's like classes on boundaries and whatnot. So I mean that it's a good problem to have. Of course, to be busy. And I love the fact that real estate is talked about. We just kind of need, like hopefully city council to step up here, with some pro growth, pro real estate policies, and not like what they've been doing the last few years since COVID. I mean, that might be a whole different story, but I do think the good news, and I really love what you said there, is like the people that do hunker down right now. I mean, obviously there's two segments in the market that I kind of think about. One is like, focus on what you can control, not what you can't, be in contact with all your people, show up and so forth. But the second part, is the cyclical nature of real estate. And I do finally think I was a little bit wrong this year, with my prediction of why owned when you could lease would start to revert back to why lease when you can own. So as a result, the transactions once again are down a little bit. 2025 versus 2024. So we're to 2024 being down from 2023, and we just talked about 2023 being down 30%. But with that, because mortgage rates are finally down, thank God, and I think people are kind of coming back to, hey, let me do something. I do believe that there is pent up demand, for more activity in the city, and hopefully, there'll be a little bit more new construction for single family homes. Like me in Northern Liberties, people talk about, oh, there's development everywhere. I'm like, yes, but it's
So
all apartment
multifamily.
buildings. Yeah, it's all apartment buildings for lease. Now, I think maybe that trend will start to, to go the other way because, now, people are struggling with vacancies and all the promotions. But I do think that there is an inherent demand, that could, finally, be beneficial, with transactions. And hopefully city council, does something, to promote home ownership, to backbone property rights. People, if someone's a landlord, they still own that property. They have rights. The squatter, why does the squatter have rights? Why does it take 6 months to a year, to get a squatter out of a property that you own?
It's
Why does it
disgusting.
why does it take forever, for a landlord to evict someone when they own the property? And then as a result, like that smaller investor that might own one, two, three, four, 5 to 10 properties, when their tenants have moved out, they've sold, Maria. They're gone and they continue to go. Now, some, are still there, but as a result, that rental inventory of homes that we kind of had throughout some of the neighborhoods is going down. And then the only thing left for some of these, folks are homes. And then those people just really aren't buying properties right now. Think about all that, tax money or the growth or neighborhoods improving, for people to be involved in the community. So I hear about these things, kind of being talked about, but until that happens, I think we're really, or the city of Philadelphia is really missing an opportunity for simply not, like be the backbone or have policies that support property rights.
Mm. It's a problem. Every day, almost not every day, a couple times a week, I talk with owners of properties that have squatters or tenants that refuse to leave every single week. They don't pay. I have a tenant not paying. Doesn't pay. Won't leave. Now I have to do the eviction. I mean, it's very frustrating. And like you, as we've been in the business so long, I have a lot of clients that just don't, friends, people that used to develop and buy in Philadelphia who've left Philadelphia.
Yeah, and some developers, left 2 years ago. Like every once in
Yeah,
a while.
they're gone.
Yeah,
They've left after COVID. After COVID, a lot of people left, and even in the last, I would say, a couple years, like 2 years. Yeah, they went to down the shore. They went
correct.
to the suburbs. I know a couple that went to like the Reading area.
Correct.
Um, but I know a lot of people that went to the beach market.
Yeah, and like every
Like,
once in a while, I won't mention any names, but I'll send, hey, maybe this person's still interested, in buying vacant land, and I'll send like, hey, yeah, it's a pretty good deal. The width, the depth, and I'll get a text back, Chris, I love you, but I told you 2 years ago I left the Philadelphia market, and just to hear that, I got to believe that, the city of Philadelphia, the mayor and the council people and the people involved in these neighborhoods are hearing some of this and be like, you know what? Why? And well, we know why, but like what's being done about it? I haven't seen anything. And in 2019, again, I'll just revert back to that, being president of GPAR, at that point, sometimes they jam bills down at the end of the year, right? So that tax abatement bill kind of came out in like October, with a vote in November. And that was the bill that kind of changed the tax abatement. I mean, that's just one part of like many. And I remember meeting every city council person, that I do that might be open to a few things. There was one or two that just wanted to abolish it completely. I didn't even bother meeting with them. And I looked them in the eye, Maria, and I said, hey, well, what about when the economy changes? And all of them just kind of looked back at me with like a blank face.
Mhm.
And fast forward, 2 years later, or even a year later, kind of COVID came, then all this other, things came. And, it was like, to me, that was one of the worst decisions ever, due to the fact that, that abatement, again, brings in so many new homeowners, brings in so many new taxes across the board, and the rhetoric of, like some of the city council people didn't even realize that someone that owns a house that has a tax abatement on it still pay real estate taxes
Yeah,
on
on
the
the
land
land.
assessment. And then when the land gets assessed higher, they pay more taxes, right? And then fast forward, I think the city of Philadelphia like released like a really nice kind of grant program for first time home buyers. And at that time, Daryl Clark was president of city council. And I went up to him, it's like, hey, out of curiosity, like where are the funds coming from this program? And he looked at me, he goes, oh, yeah, it's good. It's with all the properties going off the abatement. Yeah, it's a lot of money coming in, and then we're using it for that. Like, oh, okay. So I mean, if people could just take a step back and look at the big picture, um, it's not the tax abatement's fault, that the schools are having issues. We could do a lot with the schools, but if we don't have a thriving local economy, things might not be going that great. So I think, this is the time, I think, for all of us, in our industry, to be advocates for home ownership, for property rights, for growth, and be voices, in our neighborhoods to get involved with GPAR or just, help and educate people along the way. Because I think, things are changing a little bit for the better, but, why other states, have policies, for anti-squatting, and the state of Pennsylvania does not, or a city of Philadelphia does not. Why? Why did our real estate transfer tax go up again? When our sale prices aren't as high as all these other states, and the rhetoric was it was to support affordable housing. Well, I guess 40,000 new units would be built, but maybe that might affect 3%, of our housing population. And in turn, we just made buying a house or even selling a house not more unaffordable. So I really would like to see, some more kind of like, real estate growth minds in city council, because I do believe that every city and every location, it kind of starts with that, right? And if you don't have growth in that area, if you don't have like investment, if you don't have big picture thinking, well, pretty much your other industries and your other sectors within the city might not be as strong as you want them to be. Would you agree with that? Or, I mean, I could go on like a policy kind of rampage, but
I
um,
mean, there's so many things like the tax abatement should be 20 years, not a step down 5-year program. Should be 20 years. The city really needs it. I don't understand. Did they do a study on why they need 40,000 affordable housing units? Have they actually done like a study on that? Do they even know that that's the number? Or is it just because it sounds good? Like
it
these
probably
are
because it sound yeah, great question. And then all the studies of the benefits of the abatement, were presented. Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, like, going back, I guess this is what was kind of frustrating. Like knowing that I met with every person on city council. In reality, that bill, and I kind of found out later, I kind of knew was already done, right? So all the conversations that people had, all the one-on-ones, all the, like, when people go down to city council and testify, okay, and I did that too. BIA President Jim Ransky did it that year too. But it was already done. And how frustrating is that? Like if something's already done, why are we having public testimony on it? And I think that's happened recently with a few other. I think like this, the budget that just passed, like with what we're just talking about. Yeah, I think people went down to city hall and testified. But my understanding is that was already done too. Like, why isn't there more of an open mind, big picture kind of thinking where, the people are kind of taking in, some input, versus, just kind of putting something together, knowing that it's done and say, okay, we'll talk about this.
So, Chris, think about how many houses sell in Philadelphia County a year. And they want to bring on 40,000 new houses in 5 years. How does that doesn't even make sense, because if you look at the numbers, it would never absorb.
It's a very small number in comparison to the bigger picture. And hey, if you're going to do that, that's fine. I'm okay with that. But, like playing with the transfer tax again, for, when someone buys and sells a property, like our transfer tax is one of the highest. I think it's the second highest in the country, right? And our sale prices certainly aren't the second highest in the country. Plus we have other taxes on top of that, so, until, this tax structure maybe kind of gets changed at some point, like we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot every year, with policy that's not helping everyone, right? We have the right policy no matter where someone is, what neighborhood, what class they're in, without growth, there's either stagnation or regression. And then obviously since COVID, neighborhoods were really starting to improve everywhere, right? Like, Fishtown going to East Kensington, going past Front Street, going towards Kensington, Point Breeze, going towards Great Ferry, Art Museum going towards Brewerytown, everywhere. But then COVID happened, and with the lack of anything to do, with public safety, things just kind of pulled back. And then, it's kind of stayed that way for a while. It will improve, but and I really like to some extent what Parker has done with public safety, but we certainly need more.
There's no doubt we need more. I don't know if you notice, but a lot of restaurants aren't even open on Mondays or Tuesdays anymore. You can't even hardly find a restaurant in Center City, open on Tuesday night, except for like the star restaurants. But just even in the neighborhood, in our neighborhood, a lot of places aren't open till Wednesday. That didn't used to be like that.
No, I mean, people were out more, things were, like more energy, more flourishment. Is that the word? And then, now there's a little bit less energy. Restaurants obviously, are dealing with, their inflation issues, and just, getting by, and having to cut back or not being open. Maybe it's lack of demand, maybe it's just, being protective, with dollars and cents. Now, I am wearing my Phillies hoodie, Maria, and people that might watch this podcast later on, it might be after the fact, but perhaps if the Phillies can get by the Dodgers, we're down 1-0. That could add a lot of stimulus, to our local economy. It always does. So, hey, whatever it takes.
Red October.
Red October, baby.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, I think like people like disagree with so many things these days, and they disagree like they're so far apart, and that in turn, I think people just maybe just aren't going out as much, or there's just too much of this or too much of that. And I remember, like, again, post COVID, sports, brought a lot of people together. And, whether it's sports or something else, hopefully that could be the case again. Because I love to agree to disagree with people and walk away and still be friends, right? That's always been who I am. I don't understand, why other people don't do that sometimes too, but at the same time, I guess I do understand. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, with our industry, someone always needs a home, right? People are always upsizing, people are always downsizing. Again, hopefully this why own when you can lease trend will turn into why lease when you can own. Investments will kind of come back. So I think at the end of the day, there's either doom or gloom, or positivity. On most days, I have positivity. But on some days, with all this stuff going on, it's hard not to be, sucked in with the negativity, especially if you spend too much time on social media or watching the news or anything. So it's
That's why
tricky.
I said it's time to hunker down, blinders on. Just what's happening right here, right here. And the one thing I wanted to say earlier on was, to combat the number of transactions that are going through in this current environment. I told everybody on Friday, if you think that you need 10, you need 14 transaction or whatever number. I said add 30% to it. And then, hopefully we hope for the best and they all go through. But we can't control things that are out of our control. And that's the thing when it comes back down to adaptability.
Correct.
Back to adaptability. And back to what I was earlier on said about we are not real estate, right? But and a good year, a bad year, a good month, a good 3 years, a bad 3 years. It is what it is. And it's not, I think even myself, like I would take it like, oh, I'm a failure. Oh, it's me, and it's not us. Shit happens. And things aren't always, it's like I said, I was talking about this yesterday. I said, that's why there's sun. Today it's sunny, right? There's rain. It's cold. It's hot. Like, if it was always sunny every single day and we had no rain, we need the rain. We need the rain. We need the rain for the rain, right, for the water. But we need the rain too because the rain reminds us and gives us thanks for the sunny days. And some days we're thankful for the rainy days. And it shows us in life it's about humility, vulnerability, and for us, right, we're leadership, teaching leadership, showing by teaching. I said the other day, I said, I don't want a bunch of followers in the office. I'm gonna teach you through the Be the Solution movement leadership. I said, someday you will all, I hope, have your own teams. So,
Well, I love that, Marie. I mean, I like the saying, focus on what you can control, not what you can't. Um, and yes, I mean, there is a lot of things, external factors that can get someone frozen or paralyzed. I think it's like during those times where, a lot of people in our industry or any industry, could still have the ability to do better, by again focusing on the things they can control. And I think at the end of the day, if you or at the end of the week or a month, you did everything that you could do and then some, I think you're going to be feeling good about yourself. And then I guess the second thing about what you said, yeah, it all starts with gratitude or perspective, to be able to kind of see things in a different light. or even like see things through someone else's eyes, I think is important. I think one art that has kind of been lost to a certain degree, which is really important, in selling or communicating, is listening. And I think the people that can listen more, whether it's have empathy or really understand where someone else is coming from. And I think that's super important, in our industry. Like if you're not listening to your client or a prospect, and you just, you know, kind of doing something in a different way, I mean, that's going to catch on, right? And sometimes it is better to terminate a deal, than move on and, shove something down someone's throat. Yeah, but along the way, I mean, there are solutions, and I think it kind of comes down to, yeah, you become who you surround yourself with, right?
That's why it's important to protect our time and important to make sure that, we're around people. That's part of, doing a podcast too, because I get to at least have some interaction. I try to have one a few times a week. I have interaction with other leaders, other people in the industry, different, everybody brings a different perspective. And the other day, on Friday, I did this podcast, and I had known of this person for many years, and I saw him at an event, like a AI. Bruno and Stacy had this event, and I purposely like made an extra effort to talk with him. And I said I invited him on the show. And then on Friday, when we had this podcast, he said some things that I really needed to hear. He didn't know this. He didn't know. But I needed to hear. And I look back on that and I thought about that on Friday, and it was like divine timing. Sometimes the messages are delivered and we don't hear them. Sometimes the messages have to be delivered many times and then we're ready to hear it. And I think that's life. I think that's, I truly, truly believe this, that we are our own solution. And for us in real estate, there's so many things. I mean, in my opinion, I'm sick of the city of Philadelphia, honestly, all their nonsense. But that's where I live right now. And I'm just going to like do my thing. And, when I can make something to make things better, do my best. In the meantime, we can't control all these crazy stuff going on. And we just have to control the controllables. What we started with.
Well, I'm a huge, Bruno and Stacy fan, and for the people that are watching this, yeah, definitely follow them on Facebook. But yeah, there's something about, Bruno, like with his growth over the years, to have like a little bit of, I don't know what the word is, spiritual strength, awareness, and there's something about that. Again, I think that will get us through more difficult times, but I also think, when things are going great, it might kind of, keep us more like even keel kind of thing. And at my recent Summers team meeting, it was kind of like we wanted to like we like to have a theme for every meeting, and it was trust your process, which really obviously hasn't worked for the Sixers. But we kind of redefined that to trust your own process. And for the people that do things right each day, because I like to say small things done consistently over time lead to big results, right? And you're a testament of that. Bruno's a testament of that, whether it's real estate or whether it's your own life's growth. Um, I think that's significant, with kind of what we're talking about, because I think the better, I love the book, The Alchemist, right? Like you have to have awareness to see signals and then maybe make changes from them, whether it's one time or many times. But it's hard to have awareness when, maybe you're maybe not as in as good shape as you should be, or reading books or podcasts, or like really kind of being open to learning and growth. with your own growth, because if you don't have growth in one area here, chances are that might not lead to growth over here. So I think that's the opportunity, I think, with all of us is, it's not just selling more properties. I think the leadership of your work with your clients, but I think we kind of need more leadership in our neighborhoods and whatnot too, because I think voices are so silent. And I'm going to be a big advocate about city council, kind of like looking into policies. Like Councilman, Jeff Young called me a couple weeks ago, and he was like, "Hey, will you help me with raising funds?" I'm like, "I don't want to help anyone in city council like raise funds right now." But then it got into a dialogue, and he kind of shared with me that hey, he was more on some pro real estate bills that I was aware of, but like if voices are silent because they're afraid of like other people kind of like thinking less of them, that's not a good thing, right?
No.
If voices are silent about, hey, what can we do to improve things, but they're being scared of, well, hey, that kind of goes against the schools when it really doesn't, or this or that, that's not a good thing. And obviously that conversation on a wider scale, it's just been out there dramatically, where there's just not enough dialogue and not enough listening. And with that, that's where the leadership opportunities come. And it could be on the smallest scale or the biggest scale. But I think you and I as leaders, and in my mind, every real estate agent is a leader because they're leading, with their clients and then really helping, people to have the dreams of home ownership, or moving on to other parts of their lives. It's like, if we really can kind of like hold on to that and use that as leverage to grow, only good things can come from that. And I
That's
remember like
great.
Alan Dom will kind of talk about, the pendulums, of the city and whatnot. And obviously, it was a little bit before our time, where the center city was just not doing well, right? And what saved the center city? The tax abatement. What saved real estate in the city of Philadelphia and what started growth was the tax abatement.
Yes.
So like, the
1
pendulum,
minute. 1 minute.
we'll continue to go back and forth, but I think we could kind of all strive, for the pendulum to swing into areas where everyone, can agree upon and have like a shared mission to support that.
Well, this has been a great time with you this morning, Chris. And I love the fact that, still we still going. We're still going. We still being the solution. And it's good to see you and your growth. And, we continue just to forge ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you have two choices. Don't be part of the solution or be the solution. I think you and I, and we as leaders, we can help people be the solution.
That's right.
I know that's right.